but I'm really excited about this conversation. I think that, we have, there's so much going on, and I'm going to take just a really quick minute to, I guess, broaden my background, because I am in the Bush School now, but for 26 years, I have been a librarian at A&M. And so I come to AI in that particular lens. And so that ends up being something that's pretty multidisciplinary and broad perspective. I'm trying to bring a bit of a big picture to this. We have a lot of other speakers that'll be giving workshops that have a lot of expertise and will provide detail. But my goal is really to have a dialogue and start thinking about what is the best approach to this. And the best approach really is an individual or situational approach. But what's kind of funny, and I'm going to date myself here. So, one of the things that I wanted to kind of highlight and that I've noticed is that 25 years ago, we had the same conversation. Right now, some of you weren't really engaged in academics 25 years ago, but when the internet and the World Wide Web came to higher education, there was a lot of the same discussion, a lot of hype, a lot of question, a lot of some fear of what's this going to change? How do we deal with this? And I'm hearing a lot of the same things, and that's okay. But what this tells me is, okay, it's just now it's AI. In another few years, it'll be something else, right? So how we react to these changes, to these punctuations in technology, really says a lot. But we can learn kind of techniques and approaches. So I did want to take one quick note, and I'm gonna note there are at least 3 people from the Aggie Honor System office on this webinar. Yeah, yay! But I want to kind of point this out, that if everybody can kind of see this, there we go. That the rule has updated a bit to acknowledge AI. And I think that this is something that a lot of faculty don't know. This is something that a lot of students don't know. So I point this out because this is policy that frames behavior. And, this is something that people should be aware of. I am not going to go into this because, we have Blair and a number of people from AHS on this, and I believe they're going to be doing a session. But I would encourage you, if you have questions, to go ahead and talk to AHSO, talk to some of the faculty who are on Honor Council. But this is disruptive in a number of ways, and I find I'm really afraid, as somebody who is on Honor Council, that this is something that could easily students could find themselves in trouble without really meaning to. So I just want to raise that as one of those sort of factors that is influencing some of the behavior on campus. But I also want to point out, kind of just looking at that, it's like this is talking about use of AI in an unauthorized manner. So the instructor has the authority to authorize the use, right? And that's why it's really important for the faculty to think about this pretty intentionally and have a conversation with their students. As a librarian, I'm still having orientations with students. And one of the things I'm encouraging them to do is don't assume, ask the question. If your instructor doesn't say anything specifically about AI, then you need to take the responsibility to start that dialogue and just ask. Don't assume you can, because I think we can see from the rule that the default is no, probably not. But it also isn't something that, they need to, it can be a tool that is useful for learning, that enhances the classroom. So, part of one of the things I'm seeing is there are a lot of students who are choosing to do AI, not just use the tools, but actually study it and the implications for policy or ethics or engineering or national security. I think I've had over the past week about 5 different consults or capstone meetings. So, students are really interested in engaging on this topic, particularly in a particular context. So I think this is an opportunity for the faculty to kind of do that. I also want to just point out, when we talk about AI, and Mashapin did a great job of differentiating, we're already using AI in a lot of ways. And, Turnitin.com, right, has this AI detector, which, I think that I'll let somebody else speak to, but let's just say there's some irony that we're using AI to detect AI in the classroom. So, be really thoughtful and intentional about it. And, we've seen a number of kind of cautionary tales in the literature and the higher education news, some somewhat close to home, about, faculty acting on information from AI detectors that is maybe a little bit less than definitive. So, as people have their skepticism out about AI, I think that's good. And keeping it in mind for different things in terms of detecting AI is also really good. And another little plug for AHSO, because I think that they're in a great position to help us navigate some of these things, help our students navigate it. So I will tell you, I've had a number of faculty come talk to me, and I'm sure a number of various faculty and librarians in the departments and in the library have as well, of like, what do we do about this? What do you recommend? What are best practices? And it's kind of funny because the literature and the technology is changing so quickly that, last week is now defunct. It's been replaced with something else. So identifying best practices and saying, hey, here it is really problematic for that reason. It's also really problematic because context matters. I will come right out and say, I'm a liaison librarian. My goal, my framework is embedding in the classroom within particular departments. What that means is how students learn is really dependent on the discipline. It's dependent on the department and those goals. The use of AI or non-use of AI is really dependent on what are particular instructors' outcomes. What are they trying to do? What are the departmental goals? And what are the disciplinary norms? Looking at engineering is going to be really different than looking at business. Is going to be really different than looking at landscape, architecture. So, I think that every person is going to know best what is important in their own context, and then be able to identify, okay, this is how I can use it. This is what I should educate my students about using it. I think that these are I pulled a couple or 3 articles to kind of show, look, we're seeing this in a number of different disciplines. You'll see this from future workshop presenters. They're going to delve into some of the disciplinary practices. So, one of the things that, as you're sort of thinking about this, is, considering the factors that influence what information or AI or research or critical thinking looks like in your discipline. And I just pulled this pretty generally. This is one of my favorite sort of models to think about influencing factors on an issue. It's called a pest analysis or a step analysis. You can look it up, and sometimes they add a lot of other factors, but it's a great sort of bird's eye view on here are things that have implications for this topic. And I think the ones that I chose to represent here are ones that are sort of at the heart of thinking about information and information literacy in libraries, but they also reach out to other disciplines as well. So, looking at, as I dissect this a little bit, it's like the political or legal framework. It's like security, national security, right? How information is shared, what kind of information is shared. Can you deconstruct and pull information out of an AI? It's a black box, but it will share information with you, right? What kind of privacy requirements are there? What kind of, if you look at the EU and you look at California, both, they're already starting to have conversations around privacy requirements in AI, right? What about liability? What sort of liability is attached? As we move to kind of economics, ownership versus use. So the issue of people sharing trade secrets, you can look throughout the literature and see, I think there was a story about people from Amazon writing, using it to write memos and sharing information that was not public, right? There's also, if you read the licensing for some of these, they can reuse the data that you put in there for training data, right? It's similar to how Google uses information too. So you may be sharing information that you thought was your information, and all of a sudden they can use it in a certain way. That's one of the issues of licensing versus copyright, right? And then, economic issues. And I put this in because, we think about job loss and being replaced by AIs and whatnot, but I think that skill decay is a real issue. And in our classrooms, it's a real issue. I think that it can be tempting to say, I don't have time to, spend a lot on, writing instruction. So it's okay if a student uses an AI to get help in that regard. But what is the student getting out of it? What's the trade-off in terms of their learning? Is it enhancing, or is it actually taking from some of their learning? We know that there are biases built into these systems. It's really easy with a black box to kind of take it at face value. Oh yeah, great. I'm going to put stuff in, it's going to give me stuff. But we know that there is bias. The trading data that it uses is coming from a lot of different places, and we don't know entirely where all. But the information that it then gives back is based on that. And I'm just going to kind of shortcut to the fundamental issue of this is it's a garbage in, garbage out issue, right? So your output is only as good as your input. And in this particular case, we don't know exactly what the input is, which is a huge concern for me because, students learn from it. People make recommendations based on it. If you're starting with garbage information, you're going to have a garbage result. But that's just kind of one of the kind of frameworks that I tend to like to use. And I would encourage something like an environmental scan for faculty to look at and just consider. If I were doing engineering, I'd think about accreditation and ethics, right? If I were doing business, I might think about privacy and trade secrets. So, breaking out some of these factors and plugging them in, because I think this is also a really good framework to use with students of why do I care? How do I have to think about this to understand what's happening? It's not that AI or generative AI is bad. It's a tool. It's a system. It's being used in a lot of different ways, but we don't trust it, right? We use it and we make sure we know what we're doing and what it's giving us. Pardon. So I also wanted to just highlight that there are a lot of different strategies, and some of the faculty who will be presenting will be talking about their particular approaches. and it may be very, very large classes. I will tell you, some of Dwight's framework is on the CTE page on generative AI, and it's a really well thought out framework for how to engage a large class about how to think about this. Because I know it's really difficult to say, look, I have to have all of this information that my students get. I can't digress in a certain way, and being able to, show them what it looks like, talk about the implications, and get them to start thinking about it here is really good. You don't have to devote an entire class, right? It can just be, let's start the conversation. Cindy's going to be doing actually a number of sessions, and she's looking at writing and writing prompts. And there are a number of other people who will be addressing particular areas or approaches. And I think, and I will just share for my own class, I have a class of honors thesis students, and we're going to jump in, and I've already told them they're going to be victims. So they will be doing, as part of their own individual lit reviews, they'll be treating the AI as a peer reviewer. And then they're going to reflect and argue with the feedback they get from the AI. I think it's a good instructive technique. And I'll let you know how it goes. But they're willing. So, but I think that, it can range everything from, this very structured framework about how to think about it to something that's more exploratory. And it's really going to be up to the instructor and their capacity and their goals of what's going to work the best. But I don't think that AI is necessarily an added thing. I think it can fit in to what is happening. And then, I just kind of pulled this is not mine. But I thought it was a nice, really ubiquitous way to think of it, right? Because we all kind of recognize Bloom's of how you might think about AI and what it looks like and how it fits into the different, modes of learning. So, and I guess that's the other thing. There's so much out there. I have consulted with a couple of departments in terms of like identifying things that are specific to their department. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to figure it out yourself. You have colleagues and peers here, but there's also a lot in the literature. So, going into, ag communication or landscape architecture or, entomology, you would be surprised how much there is about AI in the classroom and using it in those even very niche kind of areas. So, explore a little bit, and I'm happy to, I'm sure any of the librarians and people interested in AI are happy to discuss and help. So, I mentioned that I tend to use kind of a literacy focus, and, one of the frameworks, so I just kind of developed a little bit of this framework that is based on 2 or 3 different literacy frameworks that look at AI within certain areas that I think are key, particularly in terms of people being consumers of information, students being consumers and users of information. And, these are I think the categories and the areas that I would focus on in the classroom around thinking about AI and thinking about information more generally. I don't think AI is, for all its capability, entirely novel in some ways. Some of these frameworks work really well. And there's also the American Library Association has an information literacy framework that's even more broad. But I would encourage you to kind of look around at what's in your discipline or what's in your field. And that's a lot of what the faculty can do is show students that line of sight to this is what it looks like in the classroom, but this is how it impacts what happens in the real world. This is how you might use this. It's really easy, I know, for me to sort of focus on, the here and now, what's happening right at the moment. But I think that if students have that understanding of, oh, okay, if this happens here, then this is what it means out there, right? And we have a lot of engineering students. We have a lot of professional programs. We have a lot of students who go into grad school and careers. So them being able to see what that looks like outside of the classroom and how it might have implications for making decisions or, what happens is, I think, really important. And then I threw this in kind of at the base. And this is sort of the approach that I'm taking with my students. It's like anything else, right? Any source you use, make sure you cite it, however you cite it, right? If you're using AI for a particular reason, okay, I'm using it in this way to do this thing. And I've talked to the students that I have met with and said, you've talked to your professor before, right? It's really, really important. Being able to duplicate some of what happens, we know that sometimes it's difficult to duplicate. And so keep good records for it. What happened? What was the response? What was your prompt? And then think about what the learning is. What does it replace? What are the implications if I can't explain this, or I don't know what happened, or I can't duplicate it? It's nice to play with something, but if it's not reliable or consistent, then that has a lot of other issues attached to it. More so, I would say, in the real world, for people using it in industry. But having students understand that now will save them trouble later. And then I guess I'm about out of time, but I just wanted to highlight the CTE has a really robust page of information. So I would go check it out if you haven't. You can need to drill down a fair bit, but there's some great examples and some really great sources. And then we have additional sessions that are occurring. And the other thing is, and I know people are doing this, it's like ask a colleague, ask a small plug for librarians. There's a number of librarians in departments and colleges who are really engaged on this issue. And they know how to find information and they love to do it. So, start having that conversation in your departments.